Hi guys, it's Debbie, and last night I watched Four Letter Words, and when I went to log it onto my letterbox, I realised it was the final Sean Baker film I had seen. Technically I still had one more of his short films to watch, but I had basically, unintentionally, completed all of his filmography. And as one of you guys suggested, why not make some more of these director ranked videos? Something which I'm very happy to do with Sean Baker because I love all of his films. Even if I'm aware that this video might be outdated very soon, as Sean Baker is still very much in the middle of his career. His new film is coming out very soon, and if you haven't seen his movies, don't worry, I won't spoil them here today. Now, one thing that is overarching in Sean Baker's movies, and which I hope I won't repeat ad nauseum in this video, is the depiction of real life stories, often with real people instead of professional actors, and often focusing on the outcasts, or let's say the regular people of society. Sex workers, food delivery people, parents struggling with their kids, real apartments, real jobs, real clothes, real shops. And in a world of glamorized stories where you can instantly tell when a rich production is pretending to know what a real average person looks like, see Nicola Peltz Beckham's movie, this feels really refreshing. I don't want to get lost into too many details now, as there is a lot to cover, so let's get into it. It's very hard to decide what film to put at the bottom of the ranking because all of his films are good, but I think everybody agrees with his directorial debut, Four Letter Words. It's always fun to watch directorial debuts in real time, as you then get curious about where this director will be in a few years, but it's also great to look back and see where a director came from and how their quirks and trademarks were already there. In Four Letter Words, we see the first signs of what would later become Sean Baker's filmography of realism, familiar locations, down-to-earth conversations, realistic outfits. But to be honest, compared to his later work, it doesn't really evolve much beyond that. It feels more like found footage of a group of young friends getting together and chatting, talking about porn, women, sex, they're drinking, throwing up, playing pool. There's no particular elevation beyond that. But at the same time, I know that this is the kind of film that if released today, A24 would be itching to get their hands on, and people would be on the website buying merch for it. Moving up the ranking is Starlet. Now, I know Starlet is one of Sean Baker's most beloved movies, and I really enjoyed it, but at the same time, I don't have the same emotional attachment to it as I have to other movies that we'll talk about later. It might also be due to recency bias, as I watched this film a long time ago, years ago back in the day, when I didn't even know it was a Sean Baker film. The movie follows a young woman living in a not so fancy situation with her roommates, with an intro that reminds me a lot of Anora, but one day at a yard sale she buys an old vase and finds out there is a bunch of money stashed in it. This leads her to start hanging out with the cranky old owner of the vase, who at first wants nothing to do with her, but as the time goes on, the two start to form an unlikely friendship. As with many Sean Baker movies, this is life, not a staged or exaggerated portrayal of it. The older actress was literally scouted at her local YMCA where she used to go swimming, and this was her only film role at the age of 85. And one thing I really want to praise about the plot is that although finding this money leads to a lot more, other directors would create an absolutely unrealistic, over-the-top crime storyline around it without considering how people would realistically react in that situation. Next up is Red Rocket, starring Simon Rex as a former porn star who returns to his old hometown and faces the life he left behind while having to explain his gap in the resume. As I briefly mentioned earlier, sex work is a recurring theme in Sean Baker's works, even if in this case the main character is no longer in that world, but still shaped by it and its consequences. Now, because of how recurring sex work is in Baker's films, people have been fast to label it as him being obsessed or fetishizing sex workers, which usually means somebody hasn't even seen his films, and forgetting that most directors have their thing without being limited by it. I mean, Sean Baker even said he'd be interested in directing a Fast and Furious movie. But just as Scorsese has gangsters, Hirokazu Koreeda has families, Nolan has mind-bending concepts, Tim Burton has death and goth aesthetics, Sean Baker has sex workers. And I don't think he has any intention of stopping. He might adapt the concept. His new film, releasing next year, is apparently a love letter to Italian sex comedies of the 60s and 70s, and some say it could star erotic film actress Laura Gemser, something Baker said is a career goal of this. Anyway, I digress. In Red Rocket, the protagonist is trying to get by. He's riding around town on his bike, talking with his ex-wife, flirting with a young donut shop worker, while also dealing with the fact that people will ask questions, especially when you don't fit in the box of what people expect you to be at that stage of your life. For some aspects, I felt like Mikey in this film, walking around my small town at the ripe old age of 33 with some life choices that not everybody agree with. Although the protagonist in this film makes some very questionable choices. In an interview, Sean Baker even described him as a sort of anti anti-hero. Also another thing, Sean Baker's movies rarely have A-lister actors. I think the most famous in his filmography is Willem Dafoe in The Florida Project. I mean, even Mikey Madison became this worldwide star thanks to Anora. Simon Rex is pretty well known, but he still blends into the film perfectly without breaking the small town realism. This film would not work the same with a Timothée or a Ryan Gosling. And if you're curious, A24 actually has a podcast in which they pair actors or directors, usually for upcoming releases. And I remember back in the day of Red Rocket, there was an episode with Simon Rex and the late Angus Cloud, and it is a bittersweet slice of film history. Now moving up, we have Prince of Broadway, which I think was unfortunately Sean Baker's biggest financial loss. This film was made on a really tight budget. It then went on to make half of that, even if now, nearly 20 years later, people are still appreciating it, saying how good it is and trying to get their hands on remastered versions of it. In the movie, a man is working the streets of New York selling counterfeit goods, but his life turns upside down when an ex-girlfriend shows up with a kid he didn't even know he had and literally dumps the child with him. So our protagonist has to figure out what to do with the kid, deal with the ex, and also keep his business running while stuck in this situation, especially in a brutally demanding New York that never sleeps, something we'll come back to later with another film. Honestly, this film felt like watching real people in real life, also thanks to non-professional actors and with a lot of improvised dialogue. There's also an interesting article in which Sean Baker said that while they were doing research for Prince of Broadway, people suggested contacting Prince Adu, who was interested in acting, and they eventually found him working security outside a shop, and he immediately agreed. Also wanted to help cast it, find locations, and help in telling an authentic story of the West African experience in New York. But next is Tangerine, a film I have spoken about extensively on my channel. I think I even included it in my best unconventional Christmas movies video. Now, although this film was shot on 3 iPhones in a style that feels more like an old school YouTube vlog, it turned into this gripping, nerve-wracking, heartbreaking but fun story of a sex worker recently released from jail who finds out her boyfriend has been cheating on her, leading her on a chaotic journey across the city, meeting all kinds of people and situations. So although the technical quality of this film isn't the highest, I think it's perfect to depict the raw nature of the streets of LA. This lost aesthetic of early iPhones captures the city in a very raw way, and the film is still drenched in colour with this strong, energetic cinematography. It never felt like this massive, polished, expensive production shutting down the streets of LA for days on end to try to recreate a reality that already is there. I mean, although it is set in LA and not New York, it felt like a Casey Neistat daily vlog. Given the relentlessness of the plot, it isn't surprising that Sean Baker in recent interviews said he absolutely loves Marty Supreme and has watched it like 3-4 times. Now, third on the podium is Anora, which is definitely Sean Baker's most commercially successful project. It was huge at its awards season, and while you can see a bigger budget, a more polished production, at the core it still feels like his other films, with its outcast protagonist, class divide, stereotypes, pushing against them. The protagonist is a stripper who starts a relationship with a wealthy client, first as a job arrangement, but then it becomes something more, giving her a new life, but also a lot of trouble. As in other Sean Baker films, many members of the cast were not professional actors. Many of the strippers at the club were strippers in real life. This film was also highly praised within the sex worker community. There was a famous screening in which strippers were clapping with their feet in stripper heels. I think Mikey Madison did a great job in this film. I hated Mark Edelstein as the boyfriend, which means he did his job well. But as it often happens, it was a side character who ended up stealing the show. In this case, Yura Borisov, who plays a Russian thug tasked with following Annie when things get complicated. Let's put it like that, so I don't want to spoil it. Moving up in second place is Takeout, a film I didn't even know was a Sean Baker movie when I first watched it. I was just intrigued by the poster. Now, to be precise, he co-directed it with Shi Ching-tzu, a long-time collaborator of his and who also directed Left-Handed Girl, which I unfortunately still haven't seen. I've been chasing this film for a year. Takeout follows an undocumented Chinese immigrant in New York City who is terribly behind on debt payments. He's stuck in a very tricky situation, and in a sort of Marty Supreme before Marty Supreme situation, he decides to make the most out of his job as a delivery man to cover it, while facing everything the city throws at him. This is the kind of film that makes you feel more empathetic towards other people's situations, what's going on in their lives, and also appreciating the people who do difficult work so others can live comfortably. We follow him through deliveries in Upper Manhattan, where social and economic extremes exist side by side. To prove how raw this film was, it was filmed on a $3,000 budget, and a lot of the film was set in a real restaurant throughout real working hours. There are long stretches of the film in which we just see people working their shift with many non-professional actors, yet it's still painfully real. I felt the sadness, the resilience, the rain, the heat of the shop. This is New York at its rawest, a place where everyone is trying to get by and it chews you up and spits you back out. But at number one, we have The Florida Project, a film I have mentioned countless times on my channel and which featured many now famous actors in their very early roles: Caleb Landry Jones, Brooklyn Prince, Bria Nate, who wasn't even an actor at the time, she was just contacted by Sean Baker through Instagram. The Florida Project is a slice of life film mostly set in a motel near Disneyland, where Willem Dafoe plays the manager. It follows a struggling single mother trying to make ends meet while her daughter spends her days around the motel, getting into small adventures and mischief, dreaming of Disney nearby. It contrasts the children's joyful imagination with the adults' much harsher reality. What I've often praised about this film is the realism of the acting, which proves you sometimes don't need A-lister actors if the performance is just right. It also perfectly captures the joy of childhood, the wonder, the imagination, the summer adventures when you don't still fully understand the world. You just love your mum, your friends, playing around the pool. It's one of the most accurate portrayals of childhood without feeling exploitative. We see Mooney using her adventures, her imagination to make the best of a situation. She can't go to Disney's Animal Kingdom, so she goes on a safari behind the motel to watch cows. You know how there is a Tarantino look and a Wes Anderson vibe? I think this is the most Sean Baker film Sean Baker ever did. I feel like I could go on for hours talking about this director, but I think I've covered the main points, and now I'd love to hear what you think about him. What's your favourite Sean Baker movie? Let me know everything with a comment down below. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.